Hello, and welcome to the Guilbault Girls Show, where you will have the opportunity to hear from mothers, fathers, siblings, and individuals themselves about their journey of living with a disability. I know, it's called Guilbault Girls, but we have a bonus for you as we get the Guilbault boys to interview some of the dads and siblings and get their perspectives too. We'll also have special guests from time to time to share the many resources that are available to those living with a disability and their families. So get ready to laugh, smile, cry, maybe even get a little angry when you hear some of these stories of their day-to-day struggles. But let's not forget their many triumphs. As they say, it takes a village. And if it weren't for our village, we wouldn't be where we are today. So join us. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Guilbault Girls. I'm your host, Karen Guilbault, and today's guest is Denise. And do you pronounce it Fike?
Yes.
Okay, good. She is the CEO of First Maryland Disability Trust. First Maryland Disability Trust specializes in cost-effective special needs disability trustee services designed to enhance beneficiaries' quality of life. They provide families, friends, and individuals with the tools to plan for current and future needs, all while protecting the eligibility for public disability benefits, which is so important. Supporting and encouraging families to plan for the future, including special needs trusts, special needs planning, settlements, inheritance, and unplanned funds, and Social Security Administration awards. So first of all, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate you taking out the time. And I'm excited to have you. This is a hard topic, for many, but it is definitely one that needs to be discussed. I know with us, we kept putting it off over the years for so many different reasons. A lot to think about, just so much to know. And it can be confusing. And then for some that are younger, their finances could play and have an issue in it too. Like, oh, I'll wait, I got to save up some money so I can, get this trust set up and do this. And then before you know it, the time goes by. And what really opened our eyes was COVID. Like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? So if I can tell anybody out there, the one thing is the sooner the better, because you'll have such a sense of relief knowing that it's done and that your loved one will be protected. You can't put a price on that. It's a budget and get it done. And it's one less thing to worry about. So for me, it was a relief. With my husband, he had more of a hard time. He kept putting things off. I'd ask him for questions. I'm like, I need this, I need that. He would put it off. Like, we have to get this done. So he struggled a bit getting through everything, because we did our wills at the time, the power of attorneys, our advanced directives, all of that kind of stuff. So before we get started with the interview too, I just wanted to share our experience when we reached out to you guys, because I feel like it's very important to people too. And one, I was actually steered your way through the ARC Northern Chesapeake region. Sue Ratman, who retired now, she was the one that had sent me your way. But I sent you guys an email and you guys responded right away. You set up a meeting and you all just sat and just listened to, everything, all the moving parts, and you guys offered advice and you made us feel at ease. And you also asked the hard questions, because there's a lot of hard questions. So we feel comfortable knowing that you guys will be there for Faith when we do pass, and it is our time. So I just wanted to thank you for that, honestly.
You're welcome.
So, all right, so let's start by telling us a little bit more about First Maryland Disability Trust, when it was established, how it was established, and by whom.
So First Maryland Disability Trust, Inc. was established in 2005 by a group of elder law attorneys who saw the need for a lot of their clients to protect finances in order to qualify or maintain public benefits. And so this group of attorneys decided that we needed a pooled trust in Maryland for not just elderly, and I kind of say that hesitantly, but for all clients who have something that they needed to protect in order to maintain their benefits, including those who might be on DDA waivers, housing waivers, all of those types of benefits. And so They got their act together. They incorporated. They had the trust drafted. In 2009, they took their first client. So it took them quite a while to get through all the red tape, to make sure their ducks were in a row.
Wow.
And so since March of 09, we've now helped probably close to 1,800 families over the years. And we have grown from being a 1 or 2 person shop to 11 people. And so the trust, I talked a minute ago about public benefits, but in the reality is there's a lot of people both with mental health disabilities, developmental disabilities, physical disabilities that just need some help throughout their lifetime. And this group of attorneys saw that, recognized it for what it was, and put this into place.
Well, I'm grateful. Can you share with the listeners what a supplemental needs trust, aka special needs trust, is, and who it benefits, and the importance of establishing one?
So a supplemental or special needs trust, the terms are sort of intertwined, if you will, or could be interchangeable. Supplemental needs means you supplement the needs of the person, don't supplant the other benefits or other income that they have. So realistically, what you're talking about is an individual with a disability. For example, say Joe's 22 and he has developmental disabilities and a mental health disability as well. And he receives SSI, supplemental income. And yet, and SSI, if you get the full amount, is $914 a month, doesn't go very far. And yet, in order to keep that money, say Joe's grandmother leaves him $10,000 in an inheritance outright to him, not in trust. It's going to have a check passed to him. That $10,000 is going to affect his ability to hold on to and not have his SSI reduced for a period of time. And so a supplemental needs trust is something where he could place those funds and have them secured for his future use and not affect his SSI by supplementing what SSI doesn't cover. Not supplanting, not taking the place of his SSI,
right? But
in addition to. Special needs trust is essentially the same. It is the same thing. Again, it's just an interchangeable term.
Okay. And I know that there are several different types of trusts which fall under first party trusts or third party trusts. So can you explain what the two are and how the beneficiaries have access to the funds?
So I'm going to tell you, in all things trusts and estates, you follow the money trail. In Joe's case that we just talked about, he has SSI. He has money that grandmom left to him outright, and he needed to shelter those funds. So he would put them in a first party trust, meaning the money belongs to the individual with the disability to start with.
Okay.
Not the parents, not the grandparents. Those funds are third party money. Third party money is anybody's money but the individual with the disability. And so first party money belongs to the individual. They need to shelter it, save it for their future use without affecting benefits. Third party money is fundraising money. It is parents, grandparents, whoever else wants to designate funds for the individual with the disability. Okay. And you don't ever want to mix the two sources of funds.
Okay, good to know. Okay, now that we know what a first party and third party trusts are, there's different trusts that fall under each of those. Can you kind of break those down a little bit for us?
Okay. In a nutshell, First party trust, there's two types, and both of which are authorized under 42 USC 1936. I could be wrong. 42 USC, United States Code. And I should know this site by heart, but my brain wasn't there today. I apologize. Anyway, the first one we're going to talk about is a D4A trust. Same section as a D4C. D4A is what we call a standalone payback trust. That trust, again, first party trust, money belongs to the individual. So say Joe gets a personal injury award and he gets a couple $100,000. Well, you want to put his money into a trust and so that it doesn't affect his SSI that we just talked a minute ago about his receiving, and be able to use it for things that he needs. So Joe could go to an attorney, have them draft a special needs trust. The attorney will pass it through Social Security for their mandatory review, make sure it complies with all of their rules, pass it through the Attorney General's office on behalf of Medicaid in whichever state he lives in. In this case, we're going to say Joe lives in Maryland because that's where we are. So we would pass it through the AG's office for their review, get their approval that it meets their requirements. And then Joe's able to fund that trust and use his funds for things that he needs, which are not covered by his SSI. Remember, that's food and shelter. So you're talking additional medicals, additional equipment, maybe education, could be a vacation, in-home care, it could be anything. So then the second type of first party trust is a D4C. Again, it resides in the same section of the US Code, and it's called a pooled asset trust. So think of it as a big fat 401k plan or a piece of the pie. So multiple people join in this pool and everybody has a slice of it. And your pools are invested typically, and your return is according to your slice of the pie. But it's a pooled trust. And the pooled trusts are good because there's a master document, a master trust that's already signed off on and approved by the Attorney General's office. It's already signed off and approved by Social Security. And then there's a joinder agreement that brings Joe into the master pool. And so that works for him. Say he got $50,000. Well, it's going to be hard to find a trustee for $50,000 unless it's a family member. And the banks don't want them. So it would sit in a money market or a checking account without any return on investment. So if you put it into a pooled trust, you're able to get that return by mixing it in with the funds from the pool and get a better rate of return on it. Same things apply to it. Those that can establish a D4A or a D4C, standalone or pool, the beneficiary themselves or the person with a disability, if they're competent, parent, grandparent, court-appointed guardian, and a valid power of attorney. So if Joe were able and competent to execute a power of attorney, but maybe he's, he can't do all the financial pieces on his own, then the pooled trust would use, the court would approve that. So then third party, again, third party money belongs to anybody who's not the individual with a disability. Third party is, you can do a revocable trust, which becomes irrevocable upon the grantor's death. So for example, Joe's mom and dad, we're going to name them Sally and Jack. Sally and Jack have a house. They have financial investment accounts. They have savings accounts. And they only have Joe, or they have Joe and we'll give him a sister.
Okay.
So they have two kids. One's disabled, one isn't. Mom and dad decide after meeting with their attorney and their financial advisors that, well, we're going to put everything into a revocable trust and we're going to be trustee. And when the last of us to die passes, that trust becomes irrevocable. And then it splits out according to their wishes in the trust. That's one type. Then you have an irrevocable trust that's drawn up at the beginning. Sally and Jack decide they want an irrevocable trust, and for whatever reason, and they're going to make this an irrevocable trust for the benefit of Joe. They're not trustee, or they could be trustee, and they fund it while Joe's alive, and maybe fund part of it after they're gone, or excuse me, while they're alive and then after they're gone. You can do a variety of ways. Or you have a testamentary trust, which is a trust that is embedded in your will and is funded upon your death. So there's a couple, and there are Maryland Discretionary Act trusts. There's several that are applicable for families.
All right. I love how you explain everything and break it down, because I get it. Because it can be very, overwhelming. And I feel like I've kind of have learned a good bit of knowledge through the lived experiences, and then just my experiences and learning how to advocate through the different avenues and agencies. Faith is 20. And so I was involved with the ARC Northern Chesapeake region from 2007. when we first moved to Cecil County. And then I helped facilitate parent advocacy classes with them for about 6 years. I've taken leadership classes with the Parents Place of Maryland. I chaired the Cecil County Citizens Advisory Committee. I finished out an appointment term for someone who left the Maryland Developmental Disabilities Council. And then when I moved to Harford County, I actually went on to work with the ARC as an employee. So like just talking to some other people too that haven't been involved with those different agencies, like it's so much because you're dealing with so much, and then you just put this on top of it too. So it's nice to have folks like you guys that sit there and are patient and explain this stuff to us and break it down. I was always overwhelmed. Like I said, I thank God for my good health all the years, because, she wouldn't have been protective, like I said, with COVID. And again, had I known more about the ABLE accounts and the special needs trusts back then, when I know now, I would have taken that step to set all this stuff up a long time ago. Yeah. So now, correct me if I'm wrong too. So when I first started out, I knew you guys. I had you guys on my list. I was referred to an attorney from Bowie and Jensen, from good friends of ours who set up their son's trust, and I felt comfortable because they had referred me. They found out too. So she also has a child with a disability. Went to the Maryland School for the Blind. That's where my daughter goes as well. Mm-hmm. So we can, if somebody wants to like, so we did everything with her, but then we put you guys as a trustee. Do you guys have your own attorneys that write up?
No, we refer out.
Okay. All right. Because that was one of my questions too. I'm like, wait, was I supposed to just go through them and only first, or was it okay that I went through someone else? And went? No. So like, that's another thing too, that, yeah.
To avoid any sense of impropriety, or conflict of interest, if you will. We've had an attorney on staff. We're actually searching for one as well now, but not to draw up documents for clients. Okay. We want you to have outside counsel. And a lot of our clients already come to us with counsel, but if not, we'd give you a list that you can choose from. Our suggestions of people that we've worked with over the years. And we just give you names. You make the phone calls, you make the connections, and you choose who you like. Mm-hmm. But we want to make sure that you have somebody you trust. Right. Obviously you like them if you're going to employ them, but somebody that's going to give you the total picture for your estate plan, because not everything needs a trust. Not everything is as black and white as some families want it to be. And there's other things that we don't do, and we wouldn't do, like your advanced directives and your powers of attorney. I want you to have outside counsel.
Right. Okay, good. Good to know. Okay. So I did do it all the correct way. So after after all of the tough questions and the help from you guys, and then the help from Sue when she was at the ARC sitting down, we came to that conclusion that, we didn't want to have our son as the trustee of the account. And it was for several reasons. One, he's in the military. What if he makes a career out of it and he's, living here and living there, and we don't know where he's going to be stationed. And not to mention every state is different with all of their stuff. For her to up and move to a state and try and get all the benefits she gets now, it's just like, another whole big debacle. But, and also, God forbid something did happen to him while he was deployed. So all these things were huge factors, but the biggest thing is we wanted him to be able to be that big brother and to be able to be there to support her on making those informed decisions without having to do all that, plus handle all the finances and all the stuff that you guys, that's where you come in as a trustee. So, and it was a big, it's a big decision for people to make, if you don't have somebody out there that, and then sometimes you may not want a family member because you want to take that out of it and have an outsider, how finances go with families, right? But, it's a lot. It's a lot. So with all of that, can you share with the listeners what a trustee is and what their responsibilities are? So you can even kind of walk us through, what happens, and maybe you can even use Faith as an example of, how often do you touch base with us? What kind of information do you keep on file throughout the time leading up to you becoming the active trustee? And then what happens while you are the trustee? Because I feel you do more than just manage the funds. You also advocate for the individual, which speaks volumes as well.
So when a client comes to us, a family, and says, I need a trust, I'm working with so-and-so attorney, this is our situation. We want to get as much information as possible. And you're right, not having a family member is often a better choice. It allows the family member to be the family member and not be the gatekeeper.
Right.
And additionally, it takes away that strain, especially between siblings, and allowing a corporate trustee such as First Maryland, it gives you somebody who has a better grasp on the rules.
Yeah.
The Social Security PUMs, the Medicaid rules, the waiver programs available, that kind of thing. So when somebody comes into us, whether it's a first party or a third party, families or planning, whatever it might be, one of the first things we do is get as much information about and or from the individual with the disability. And so because we have clients, I think our youngest one is like 5. And our oldest client is in her 90s.
Okay.
It varies who we get the information from, but it's always about the client, not necessarily about the family, although we look for that family dynamic, but about the client. How old are they? What's their living situation? What's their disability? Is it physical? Is it mental health? Is it developmental? What needs do they have that correspond to that disability? Do they need special medical equipment? Do they need one-on-one care? Do they need additional education because maybe it's a developmental disability, but they're very high functioning, and with some additional education or additional support could get a job. And so we look to get as much information about the individual as possible. We look for their income, We look for their expenses. What are they on a monthly basis? What are they on a yearly basis? Because, car insurance once a year, once every 6 months, renter's insurance, whatever else there might be on a yearly basis. So we look at income and expenses, and then what's available in the trust that's either being left to them or that is theirs if it's first party.
Mhm.
What are the goals for the trust? What are the needs, and what kind of budget do we need to set out? And so a trustee should, whether it's First Maryland or somebody else, should be able to have all that information and work with it. Is the housing appropriate? Do they need different housing? Is a licensed clinical social worker needed? Are there other support staff needed? And a trustee would work or should work to help make sure that happens if it's needed. In addition to just the finances, which is, yes, taking the money in, managing it, making sure that it's invested appropriately, and again, depending upon the amount of money, or that it's at least being overseen appropriately. Some trusts have to report to the court. Some trusts have to report to the state. If it's a D4A trust, a standalone special needs, there's a yearly requirement to report to the state. So you want to make sure whoever is handling the trust as trustee also meets those reporting requirements. Trustee also should be in tune to make visits, make phone calls to the individual, be available for phone calls from the individual. And I would use Faith as an example, but since I'm not the one that handles her file, we have trust administrators in our office that do that. What I would say is we try and touch base with our clients several times a year. Some clients are a couple times a month. It depends on whether the client has family involved. We have clients who have no family, or we have clients whose family is older and they just can't do it any longer. So we've picked up that slack. And so how often we communicate, visit, email, whatever that communication means, is determined by the individual and their trust administrator and what they need, who's in their life. And any good trustee would be thinking about that as well.
Make me like tear up just like talking about, because it's emotional. So just thinking ahead, like I'm glad that I went with you guys. That's all I'm going to say. Let me see. Okay. So I know, all right. So I know another important question that we had was, what if she moves to a different state? Then what happens to the account? Does it stay with you all, or does it get transferred to another agency within the state that she moves in? So he gets stationed out in Colorado and he decides to stay out there, and he moves her out there and she wanted to go out there. And so then how does that work with the trustee and the account?
So realistically, in Faith's case, in this example, because you all are setting up the trust and you are funding it, it's third-party money, we could hold that trust yet at First Maryland and work with her long distance. But that's not optimal,
right? Because
we don't have eyes on her at that point.
Right.
And so, the Social Security rules are nationwide. Medicaid is state to state. Yeah, we could figure that piece out. But the bigger piece is we don't have eyes to see our client. And so realistically, what we would do would be to contact some of our colleagues across the country and say, and whoever's in Colorado, and say, hey, we've got a third-party trust. Our client's moving into your area. Can you guys handle this? And we would make sure that there is an appropriate successor trustee to us if that were the case.
I think that's also, all this stuff is peace of mind. Okay, so I think that's all of the questions that I had, but before we wrap it up, is there anything else that you would like to share, or any advice that you would like to give our listeners? Because the one on the ABLE account was, so many people watch that, and this is another big, huge one that our population, it's huge, but is within our community of people. But any advice or anything you would like to share about first
So the
disability or
first,
anything?
well, the first thing I would say is, to your listeners, to your colleagues, those who have children or parents even with disabilities, don't wait to do your estate planning. You want to make sure, because nobody's guaranteed tomorrow, you want to make sure your ducks are in a row. And that means making sure that your child is protected and taken care of, and have a contingency plan. Because the best laid plans, as Steinbeck always said, you want to make sure that you have somebody in place to help your disabled person, or your and to make sure that they're getting everything that they need if you're not available. Talk to a few different companies, talk to your attorneys, get the best ideas for who's able to help you when you're not able to help yourself. Or, because don't just think of it as when I'm gone, think of it as if I become incapacitated, who takes my place?
Yeah.
And, to replace a family member is difficult, and nobody wants to do that. But on the other hand, you need to plan for something. And I'm not trying to be a doomsday person, because that's not my thing.
But it's
But
realistic. Yeah, be real.
it is. We've seen families who, have waited till the last minute, and what they're planning, what they were wanting to plan, because they waited, didn't happen. And it created other issues. And so I would say, get your estate planning done. You want your wills, a trust if applicable, your medical directives or your living will, and if need be, a DNR. Look at, and the other piece of this, it's really hard for families to grasp. If you have an individual who is disabled, pre-plan a funeral. Don't wait until something happens and you're struggling with that. Pre-plan it now. Put it into an irrevocable funeral trust. You need it, call us. We'll give you some suggestions, but don't wait if you don't have to. And that's a really hard topic for families to come to grips with. And I get that. It's hard when you have a loved one who passes and you're struggling to go through that grief and that process right at that time. Pre-plan it, and you don't have to worry about that part of it. And then it's not something that your successor has to worry about either. The other thing I would say about First Maryland is, as we grow, we are taking on the responsibility as representative payee for clients for their Social Security benefits.
Okay.
We advocate for them as well on the Social Security level. We are also handling financial power of attorney. So if someone needs that and needs that assistance with paying bills and those types of things, we can help with that. So when you're thinking about your estate planning and you're thinking about who's in your life down the road, because we do have families, parents who have nobody else but their child, we can help with those things. More than happy to talk with you about it.
And they can find you just by Googling First Maryland Disability Trust.com, correct?
Yes, actually First Maryland Disability Trust.org.
.org. Oh yeah.
.org. That's okay. I had to think about that for a minute myself.
And I will also put that in the show notes too.
Sure.
One thing that I do for all of my guests as a small token of appreciation for just coming on and being a guest and sharing is I hand stamp meaningful words into tokens, one letter at a time, with a hammer and everything. And I wanted to know, and I think I did send you that what's your word flyer.
You did.
Okay. So
You
I
did.
wanted
Thank
to
you.
know, you are welcome. What word is meaningful to you that you would like me to stamp, and if you'd be willing to share it and why?
My word would be grace. I would say by God's grace, we are where we are. You know, but also it is giving grace to those who need it most when they need it, whether it's a kind word, a handshake, a smile. You don't know how you're going to affect anyone in any given day. Do we all have bad days? Absolutely. But there's always somebody else whose day is worse. And by extending some grace to that person, and sometimes to yourself, give yourself the time to sit back and think about, what do I need to be doing? How do I need to do it? Who do I need to talk to? Everybody, I've been told I'm a workaholic, but I have to give myself that grace occasionally to sit back and just breathe. And realistically, for those who have people with disabilities in their lives, I've taken care of my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, helped with my dad, took care of my uncle. I'm taking care of my aunt. Grace has a lot of meaning in a lot of different words, in a lot of, it has a lot of different meanings. Let's put it that way. And sometimes that is just giving yourself the opportunity to relax, but extending something to someone else to help them out.
Yes. I love that. Okay. I'm breathing.
Take that deep breath.
Yes, many of them. Well, I just thank you so much for being on the show.
You're welcome.
This
Thank
is
you
going to
for
help so
asking.
many people, and I know it's just put another whole layer of ease that I know that I did the right thing by going with you guys. So everybody stay tuned for the next episode, and I will also have their information in the show notes. Till next time. Thank you for joining us as we spread awareness through our personal stories and the many resources shared. You can help us by joining our village simply by sharing our show to the masses. If you would like to support the Guilbault Girls on another level, click on the link in the show notes to make a donation in any amount. Add your address and you'll receive a hand-stamped token with the word village on it in appreciation. Be sure to subscribe to our Guilbault Girls podcast and YouTube show, and don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Guilbault Girls. Till next time.